the home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
Views,
there's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
Sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuga Online, your inspiration radio station.
To the leadership masterclass. Yeah, you guys. I think I've been doing this V20 people for a long time now. I feel like I'm a resident at V20. So last week, one of the conversations we were having on the radio was the whole conversation around with South Africa being in the presidency of the G20. And I think we had in the country the G20 finance ministers, finance guys who actually were here. The question we were asking is South Africa's presidency of the G20 late, or is it still on time for it to impact the world in terms of the way it is? So those were some of the conversations. And then, of course, what was nice was that just after that conversation, we had Tabani Mlilo, who then was speaking about sustainability and the V20 in that instance. So it feels like we are quite intertwined with the work of the V20 and the G20 in this instance. And today is no difference because I have Mondendlovu as well as Randy Mauni, who are part of the streamlets of this work as we continue to meet the different people that are part of this work that South Africa is currently leading. And you know that the V20 or Values 20 theme here is Living the Values, which is intended both as an aspiration and a call to action, calling individuals, institutions, and nations not only to just talk about all of these big goals and what we want to change, but also the values that sit behind them. And I have a feeling that's the one big change that we are probably introducing so far as I'm getting into this conversation. So I want to welcome our guests. Welcome, Wendy. Welcome, Monday.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for having us. A pleasure to be here.
No, the pleasure is all mine. I'm always looking forward to this conversation. So first things first, it will be good to know a little bit about who you are in the room in this instance. Let's talk to the listeners about who each of you are, if you can introduce yourselves.
That's such a broad question. I don't know whether it's ladies first or gentlemen first, or what is correct
Ladies.
protocol. It's such a broad question. And, I've started to, when I'm introducing myself lately, speak more about what I'm passionate about than about what my title is. I always say, if you want to know what I do, you can go onto LinkedIn and my entire long bio is there of everything that I'm involved in. So I have a change intelligence consultancy, which is what I do as my day job. And we've been running for about 10 years. We work with a number of corporates and we work with aligning their leadership towards whatever change they're wanting to implement in their environment through human transformation. But what I'm most passionate about is inclusion. And inclusion is something that is, it's a broad topic. It's a very misunderstood topic. That was a large part of my master's, a large part of my PhD. And where I feel my purpose is to focus on shifting capitalism to become more inclusive, and which the end result would then be a form of capitalism that is pro-profit free enterprise, but not the cost of any stakeholder. So any activity that aligns with that is where I focus a lot of my personal passion. And that means that I chair a lot of organizations, specifically nonprofits, and I also head up the organization stream for V20.
Fantastic, and you would be the right person for this conversation. And I'm curious to then figure out what is it then that you are doing for the V20. But let's go to you, Monde.
No, thank you very much, again, for the opportunity to engage this timely moment. Yes, it's it can be an extensive question. Who are you? So one of the ways in which I answer the question is to say that, well, I'm a product of different communities that I've been part of. I did not just fall from the sky and dropped off in some village or in some place. So I really am a product of my family, my upbringing, the communities I've been exposed to, the communities I've been part of, organizations that I've been part of, part and parcel of the makeup of who I am. And as a result, I may play different roles in different organizations. On a day-to-day, I may be the managing director of the Black Management Forum, but that's just one of the roles that I'm in as a product of my community. And so, amongst other things I may be involved in, but at the heart of it, really, I enjoy answering that question by saying I actually am a product of my community. I mean, in connection with all the different facets that make up who I am today as a human being as well. And so we are community-based and community-bound, especially with our philosophical output or outlay and understanding such as Ubuntu, which goes very deep in terms of that human nature. What makes us human and truly human is that really we are a product of community. And so I never detach myself from that. It's part of how I've been raised as well. Then everything else just flows from being a product of community as well.
I love that, by the way. Sorry, side note. Products of community. Yes. And it speaks exactly to V20, right? In terms of solidarity specifically, I suppose.
Yeah, I love that as well, Wendy. I think it actually speaks quite a lot. It says a lot also about the whole idea of roots, right? I mean, when you talk about inclusion and exclusion, that's already the shadows of communities from which we come from. But how do we define these communities and what they mean for us would be a conversation I'd like to explore a little bit more. Now that we've been introduced to our guests, I want us to take a quick break so that I don't interrupt them with a break, because I'm interested in. So with all of these very interesting background, and I think just when you're talking about the intelligence part, and then with you, Monde, talking a lot about the BMF part, I wanted to know what does that now have to do with the V20 when we come back? You are on the Leadership Masterclass. We'll be back after this.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
Views.
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
Sports.
What do you say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
And music to inspire you every day. This is Vuga Online, your inspiration radio station.
People, welcome back to the Leadership Masterclass. We are hanging out with Wendy Mani and Monde, who are both talking to us as the stream leads within the Values 20 process. And so, Monde, let's start with you. I like this introduction, as I said before you went around being rooted in the community. But what does this have to do then with the V20?
So it's got everything to do with V20 because V20 has set itself out to define certain values. And so when you now want to have a values conversation, you have to look at different communities, right? So you got to decide now, which values are you going to focus on? Are these values based and rooted in society or not? Are these values based on the capitalistic model, global capitalistic model, whose values are fundamentally different completely, because the business of business really is to create value for shareholders, right? And that's how it's really defined, whether we like it or not. So it's quite an audacious goal to take a step back out of all the G20 engagement groups that exist. V20 actually is probably the most radical out of all of them. And as you've seen in South Africa, you've got B20 business, you would expect a business 20, right? You've got
Youth 20.
Youth 20, which is slightly interesting flavor, right? But it makes sense from a South African point of view that young people, must be given space to come out and share their views, because we've got Youth Month, right? So why 20 makes sense. Women 20, also starts to make a bit of sense as well, because we've got challenges around women empowerment, women leading, women challenges in the country. So that also makes sense that there needs to be a focus on women. Startup 20 as well, right? So there's been this drive about SMMEs. How do SMMEs in South Africa begin to grow? So there is a logical flow out of why those must exist, right? But now when you say values 20, it almost puts up a wall to say, wow, okay, what exactly do you mean? Because in some of the engagements that we've had with people, you can tell that people take a step back, and you'd be surprised how many people actually reflect personally on their own value system in the country and even globally. It's not a norm that people actually sit down and say, these are my values as an individual, these are my values as a family, or our values as a family and as a community, etc. So those processes are against the grain, right? So we're swimming against the tide in terms of what V20 actually stands for. It is the only engagement group whose mandate cuts across all of them. The foundation of all of the engagement groups and G20 itself is a values debate, because the outcomes of G20 will have a direct impact on society in the long run and community as well, based on what they choose to prioritize. And the level of prioritization largely depends on the values that are being held by the leaders that are making those decisions. So values cut across every engagement stream. That's what makes V20 quite unique. And we've got that 3-year plan as well in South Africa. So, after we've handed over to United States, hopefully later on in the year, in South Africa, we want to proceed with the discussion on values in the country. So values really very, very different, very unique. It's a cause for debate. What do we value? Values that are good for society. What are those values? And we've had those debates, and we've chosen Ubuntu as the anchoring value out of all of them. That's what centers us. And hence, when you go back then to the question of roots, what anchors V20, we're now looked at what actually is unique about South Africa, Southern Africa. It is that concept of humanity, of Ubuntu. And that now paves the way for what kind of human being we want to influence, what kind of human being we would want to interact with and influence, and for them to embrace what Ubuntu truly means amongst the other values within V20. So Ubuntu is emerging as a key value because of what is unique about our context as Africans in South Africa.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and we'll talk a little bit about this cutting across, but also this whole concept of Ubuntu, which I want to delve a little bit. Every time I speak to Dr. Dumi, we kind of go into a bit of a giggle because we have this in-house conversation that we have about this Ubuntu-ness, which I will share just now. Anything you want to add, Wendy? What does all of this intelligence stuff have to do now with the with the V20 here? It looks like we have lost Wendy there for a few minutes, few seconds. All right. So it looks like we have lost Wendy. She probably just melted out, and she probably will join us back. Wendy, if you are able to jump out and then jump back in, and let's see what's happening. So let's carry on. In the meantime, oh, there you go. Oh, there you go. Welcome back. You can unmute.
Sorry, gentlemen, I have no idea what happened. What I was saying, and obviously for dramatic effect, then the screen froze after that, was that, values are our deepest unconscious drivers. Our values are linked to our beliefs, that drives our thoughts, our actions, our words, our deeds, So if you look towards behavior, which is the output, you've got to dig into what our values are. And so South Africa, we need to implement some change. So as a society, we need to align our behavior in order to be able to support that change. So that's what the link is in terms of change and values and behavior. And I love what Monde was saying in terms of Ubuntu, and I'm going to wait to hear your story just now also. And also, Monde mentioned the product of our community, which is also one of the principles of Ubuntu. I am because we are, which is something beautiful to our country. And if you look at the values, V20 South Africa is focused on living values. So we have a research stream, we have an advocacy stream, and there are various leads within each of those different streams. And so what we are looking at in South Africa is we're trying to understand, what does solidarity, equity, and sustainability mean in this African context? Where are we at the moment? Where do we move towards? So there's a lot of academic rigor behind V20, which I'm particularly passionate about, not academia, but I'm passionate about the validity and reliability of the work that we're actually doing. And then you've got all of these streams, which are largely focused on advocacy. Again, it's a long game. So we are not, yes, V20 is a social stream of G20, but this is not just something we're doing for 2025. We've got a very much a long-term vision. So our ultimate vision would be in 5 years' time that we have got a national values charter that has been socialized across Africa, that looks at how these values are being lived. It looks at the gap between, and that actually is then adopted by not only just the various sectors from government to organizations, but also the public, where we say, right, these are the values that we as a country are actually going to all collectively live towards to ensure that we have a society that has equity, that has sustainability, and that has got solidarity. And then again, that solidarity speaks to not only what Monde was saying in terms of Ubuntu and in terms of being a product of our community, we're also part of a global community, which is what G20 is. So G20 is saying we've got these global problems, but we're all interconnected. So it's, we one system across the world is going to affect us, and one community in our country is going to affect another community. So how do we all in solidarity look at these challenges and resolve our challenges? How do we correct injustices? How do we make opportunities fair and equitable for all in South Africa? And how do we make sure that our actions that we're taking today are sustainable in the future, that we keep taking our youth with the decisions that we're making? So these are, in terms of the work that V20 is doing, it, again, even though it's a social stream of G20, it far transcends G20 in that it's actually looking at a complex system, not only in South Africa, but also globally, and saying, how do we align for better outcomes for all stakeholders? So does that answer your question?
Well, I'm listening, right? Because I don't know what the answer is. I'm really just asking the question from that, and I think the more I'm listening to the both of you, on one level I'm excited, on another I'm kind of scared and a bit worried, right? So maybe let me talk a little bit about what my concern is. Maybe starting with you, Wendy. One of the things you've actually just made clear, I mean, I've had a number of the conversations with a number of your colleagues. One of the things that makes a lot more sense for me now is, oh, there is an intention. I mean, I've heard that there would be a 3-year thing that would happen, and then it will happen beyond the US. But I didn't know what the outcome is. What are we intending to really come up with? And then you speak about creating what national values that we all would ascribe to. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, correct. A national values
Yeah.
charter would be the ultimate end outcome.
Yeah, it's very useful. I don't think we've said that enough, right? Because then it also then comes to the piece that then says, if that's the case, do we have uh, enough right people? And right people here would be from different parts of the communities that are involved in this conversation, because it might then come up as the national charter might end up being this elite document that was designed by the people in the tower, at least in terms of the
Correct.
perception. If I say that, what
Correct.
would the both of you say?
Again, I'd allude to what I was saying earlier in terms of the division. It's been V20 is incredibly well structured. So you've got advocacy streams and you've got research streams. So because of the academic clout that is underpinning and supporting the research stream, they'll be looking at exactly what you've just raised. So it's not going to be solidarity through our lens or equity or sustainability through our lens. It has the academic rigor and validity to ensure that all communities or their perspectives and their lived experiences and their understanding of these terms is well understood.
All right, cool. So anything to add, Munda?
Yeah, just also add there to say that even the streams that we had, I mean, we started with 3 streams on the advocacy side, but because of understanding or better understanding, the depth of the issue on values, it necessitated a further increase of the streams because values touches every aspect of our lives in society. And so then that increment then started to take place precisely because of that reason, that there's so much work to do, there's so much ground to cover around buy-in on values, and actually highlighting that a lot of decisions that we make, that we have made as a country, are really based on whatever values that we held at a particular point in time. And so it's really circling back into what kind of country do you want to see, what kind of leadership do you want to see, what kind of outcomes you want to see, and then checking the software that is informing the hardware, right? So we're not just analyzing the hardware now. We know the problem is not the hardware, it's the software. So values, what we're trying to do is reset the software of South Africa Inc., which is a tough ask.
I love that.
So that's what V20 is trying to do, and hence, even when Professor Mohale speaks about it, one thing he has made clear is that because of the nature of values, we're going to need even more people to participate in this agenda, because it's about all of us. It's not focused just on business or focused, it underpins everything. And so if you want to reset the software of South Africa Inc., you better have South Africa Inc. involved in the process, and also understanding that it's important for us to have this discussion, because that's the other thing that has been taking place, to say, why are we talking about values? What's the big deal about values? Now, precisely because of those questions, values become even more important, because people need to understand that really, yes, we can unpack this from a psychological point of view, that the problem is the software, that the decisions that we've made as a country are coming directly from what we hold true, and the values that we hold dear, whether conscious or unconscious, as Dr. Wendy has said. So it's quite key that we're trying to take everyone along, and it's going to take us a long time to do that, because we have not had this type of national engagement. So even with the national dialogue, right? If you look at what has been communicated about the national dialogue, you're not hearing a lot of values in there. There's this group that's going to meet, I think, on the 15th of August, will then talk about the agenda of the national dialogue, which will take place over time. So they'll prioritize, these are the issues that need to be engaged, etc. But our values playing a critical role, and hence the voice of V20 needs to become stronger to say we need a values charter for South Africa Inc. in order for us to reset our software as a people.
Yeah, it felt, Wendy, you wanted to jump in there somehow.
No, I love the software of, I just love that analogy, that metaphor, because I always say that, we are, if you understand a little bit of neuroscience and you understand how the conscious mind and the unconscious mind works, we operate in so little consciousness that we largely are supercomputers. So what Monde was just saying is so valid and so apt, is that we are trying to change the software of our individual minds, which is where your values actually reside. And obviously our collective software, which is the collective minds of South Africa, where our values actually reside, and say, hold on a second, we need to actually make this hardware change, which is actually a software change. So I love, no, the only comment was just, I love the metaphor.
Yeah. This is such really hard work. I don't want to sound pessimistic at all. I'm just feeling the weight of how important this work is then, if especially now. I'm glad you mentioned the national dialogue, because I'm looking at the noise, right, that kind of surrounds it, which possibly this conversation should be the conversation that the president, not pointing fingers, but the president as a spokesperson of the national dialogue should be putting at the center of the conversation. I mean, one of the things that your colleague in Yeleti has said, which made sense to me, and I don't know if we making enough noise about that as well, from a branding exercise and activation piece, because South Africans, there's just so much noise that's happening in this country. And she said something which is beautiful, which was, it's our new 1994. So we are in a sense revisiting what 1994 brought, was very tangible processes, procedures, governance, structures, etc. But then, to your point, Monde, one of the things that didn't shift, or at least stayed behind as we moved, was expectations around what do we now want from our country, and how do we all take collective responsibility to shift in a direction. So when we come back, I want us to go a little bit deeper into this conversation and say, so if I'm saying this, what does that mean? What does it mean then in terms of what we should see, or what we could see, that's coming from the V20? But Monde, I also want to talk to you a little bit about this. It's my favorite topic, and you do this equality stream, because I'm also thinking we are possibly in one of the most unequal times in South Africa today. Um, which makes this work really hard. Are you guys crazy? Why are you trying to do such hard work? But we'll be back on the Leadership Masterclass after this. We are more music, more inspiration. So we're going to take a little bit of music to kind of calm down. You can hear I'm waking up a little bit because, hey, we'll be back after this.
How do you know the life of personal coach you're about to work with is who they say they are? How do you know if they can do the job? At the Africa Board for Coaching, Consulting and Coaching Psychology, we can tell you. So, before you share your secrets and spend your money, check with us first. Visit www.abccccp.com or call us on 012-751-7608. The ABCCP, the professional body for coaches.
Back to the Leadership Masterclass, and we're chilling to leadership, and I'm gonna have to take a quick break because it looks like my power is actually running away with me. So Wendy, I'm gonna anyway take a break so that we have that silent piece in this. So give me a few minutes, anyway, a few seconds. I just wanna plug in the power here.
Sure, no problem.
The last thing you want is to stop in the middle of. There we go. Welcome back to the Leadership Masterclass, and we're chilling to leadership. I love the whole idea of chilling to leadership. On Fridays, I chill to jazz, and on Mondays, I chill to leadership. I am the luckiest father in the world. So before we took a break, I kind of felt a bit overwhelmed on both of your behalf, because technically what you are doing is a reset, as Monday, to use your phrase, a reset around where the country is. And many people right now are in a space of in a cynical space, not even skeptical, in a very cynical space. And this work that you guys are doing is really big. So if that's the case, what are some of the mechanisms, tools that you are using to actually shift this?
So I think one of the key areas that we've identified in order to shift is to dialogue, because dialogue is quite important. So let me also posit this with the history of dialogue in the country broadly, because South Africa had specific choices to make in '93, especially after the death of Chris Hani, and Nelson Mandela came on television, and he took a hold of the situation because we could have slipped into civil war, and he silenced the guns. Yes, there were people who were not happy about those decisions, but he then set the path of dialogue in the country for us to engage with different communities, right, within the country. So that legacy of dialogue, sometimes, one feels we underestimate its impact because South Africa could have been engulfed in blood for many years, post 93 and 1994. And so that's a very key lever of heightening the issues on values and what it should mean. And so taking a leaf out of Madiba's book, and we are, in the month of July, we come from Madiba Day as well. So it makes perfect sense as well, but it's one of the key areas of his legacy that we don't speak much about. So one of the reasons why South Africa does dialogue a lot is precisely because Mandela set the path of engagement, right? But his level of engagement, though, which I think is an area that we kind of, have not dealt with sufficiently, is the fact that it was constructive, progressive engagement, right? It was not just engagement which created a static process. He was always engaging for a particular cause, right? Going in a particular direction for the benefit of many. Always willing to listen, always willing to engage, but you got to understand that we are moving in a specific direction as well. And so, yes, there may be dialogue fatigue in South Africa, which is true. There's also a transformation fatigue as well, because we're talking a lot about transformation, talking a lot about dialoguing, but is there sufficient progress in a particular direction? So that's one of the mechanisms that we've chosen to adopt, that we want to dialogue. That's number one. And then number two, the other mechanism is for us to reach out to organizations that are already in the space of advocacy, advocating for change in South Africa, advocating for the development of the country. And we've reached out over a period of time to them, whether it's the BMF, whether it's educational institutions, and others who may be like-minded, foundations, as well. So we've then taken a step back to say, who in the country is actually already on this path of talking about the kind of changes that we need to see? So let's bring them into V20, and let's hold hands, together as well. So dialoguing, key stakeholders have been the key levers that we've used to try and heighten this. So the kind of partnerships that we have around there. Then the question would then also be, who are we targeting? Right? So that's what also makes it difficult. So who are we targeting when we say we want to dialogue about values? So that's another discussion, that we've had, to say we brought in these different stakeholders in society, in business, otherwise academia, etc. But actually, who are we targeting? Who are the listeners? Yes, it's the country. That's the burden you're talking about. We have the burden of the country, but realistically speaking, we've chosen to be a bit more methodical in how we want to raise the awareness of, right? So the phase we're in now, it's the phase of raising awareness of V20, raising the awareness of values, and through the partnerships that we've been, engaging. And it's been difficult to get some of them over the line because they're asking these difficult questions, why V20? And what exactly do you want to achieve? So we've had ongoing engagement with different key stakeholders, variety of stakeholders as well. And we've also seen, the work that they also doing. So talking about inequality, there is a particular stakeholder we're trying to get over the line that has an inequality report that's coming out very soon, if it's not out now. And precisely because, they do some work in society, and then also do some research as well. So, we wanted to then, have conversations coming out of that inequality report, what's coming out, what are some of the recommendations, and then ultimately looking back to say, who are the key levers, again, who can make things happen, right? So that's why the research component is important, so that we table to G20, recommendations that link values to key decision-making in the country that can move the needle on important issues. Maybe on a last point, one of the engagements that we've had, actually very, very profound one, there is an organization in the country, a nationwide business, and they struggled with business performance for some time. And the executive came in, etc., and they then did a reset with their values, right? A reset on their values. And as a result of that process of resetting their organizational values, etc., and then change management, etc., that takes place after that, their business performance has improved. So there is a link as well between values and performance as well. So
100%.
they are a case study on how these socially good values can be inculcated in business, and actually there can be good performance of the business, because at the heart of business anyway is people, not only processes, it's actually people who are managing processes and outcomes. Yes, we've got AI coming in like a storm, but again, it's people, human beings who are driving these processes. So that business is a key case study. And I know there's others as well that have used values and focused on values. So you want to elevate that in the business community to say, hold on, here are case studies of businesses in the country whose performance has actually improved as a result of focusing on values and values-driven leadership within those companies.
And there are a lot of global examples, and there's a lot of research that backs it up, but we don't have enough African examples. And one of the initiatives that we're a part of is creating what we call a V Corp. So V Corp is Values Corporation, similar to the concept of the B Corp. And we're working with our research partners, and we're working with some frameworks at the moment, creating a framework specifically geared around these living values of solidarity, equity, and sustainability, and saying, right, so how are those actually lived in organizations specifically, and ensuring that organizations are part of the V Corp program, where they'll actually be audited every year to see what level are they at in terms of actually living out these values. So again, that's a 5-year goal that we're moving towards, but then also society can start to make informed decisions with their money, because money also will drive the change in behavior. And one thing that Monde mentioned earlier was this concept of, empowered responsibility. I think also you also mentioned it in terms of this powered responsibility, and should V20 be a social stream or an official stream or so forth. But I think this time is calling us to actually be the leaders that we actually want to be, and to empower every layer of society to go, hold on a second, something needs to change. Instead of us waiting for a change and waiting for a leader to come on board, or an organization or government, let's be part of that change. And something like a V Corp also then empowers every single citizen to go, hold on a second, are you V Corp certified? What level actually are, based on this framework which has been developed through our research stream and based on best practice, and saying, right, well, I want to put my money where it's actually going to actually cause a shift in society, because you're already focusing on activities that are, linked to equity, sustainability, and solidarity. So therefore, whatever I'm spending is going to further accelerate the change that we actually want to have in South Africa.
Yeah. What I like with this conversation, particularly in this instance, is that there are some hard artifacts, right, that actually are coming out um, beyond the dialogue. Because I think going back to the whole idea around dialogue fatigue, part of the cynicism is, oh yeah, another talk, another dialogue. I don't need another dialogue because we work with people on the ground who for them, their lives are touched continuously every day. I mean, my mother is famous now on this show because I always say, what would my mother in Fosloras be able to experience or feel as a result of this work that we are doing in this instance? And I like the value scope because then and the measure of some sort that actually then keeps the conversation going as a link. I like the goal, a very hard artifact of a charter, a values charter for the country, a national charter for the country, because then it is something hard that we all can hold ourselves accountable for beyond the dialogue. But the last piece I actually really enjoy about this, and I think I want to come to you then, Wendy, and this we start to wrap up, is this idea around using the science of optimism um, to kind of drive performance, because I don't think we do a lot of that. I think many times we spend so much time paying attention to what's not working as opposed to what is working. How do we like the people in Bhutan, how do we create a sense of optimism, but not fake optimism, but optimism that's really embedded in two or three really core elements of who we are that then can take us forward and extend and double contribution. Now, what I wanted to ask though, Wendy, is do we have, based on the data that you guys have, do we have change intelligence, and what does it tell us about how ready we are for this kind of work?
If I'm looking at the activation that's happening within just specifically, V20 itself, I believe that we are ready. I believe that we are at a time now where we are ready to collectively effect the change that we actually so desperately need in South Africa from the bottom up. We're not waiting for anybody top down. We're actually starting to push it bottom up, which also will be more sustainable. And to your point in terms of, the science of positivity and return, we have in our brains, we have what we call it's called an RAS, which is a reticular activating system, and that filters our reality. So no two people see the same reality because it depends on what we are putting our attention on and so forth. And I always use the example of my vehicle. Before I had my current vehicle, I had a BMW and I wanted to buy a BMW again. And my brother said to me, you know what, I buy a Lexus. And he sold me on the reasons why to buy a Lexus. And I said, do we actually even sell Lexus in South Africa? And he said, oh my gosh, of course we do. And then as soon as I bought my Lexus, I saw them all around me. And it's because of that reticular activating system is that we see what we put our attention on. If you understand our brains, we are only able to process a very small amount of information that comes through our senses. So when we start to focus on empowering and inspiring and what change is actually happening, and that you can make a difference and there are opportunities, you'll start to see that accelerate more and more and more as that dialogue and that conversation starts to change. So I believe if where I'm sitting at and what I'm seeing in terms of activation happening at ground level, I'm very optimistic for our future. We just need to continue the momentum.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you. I'm thinking about. I'm old enough to remember the ZBK. I don't know about the two of you. I think you guys are relatively young, but in the 80s, we had something that had to do with cleaning up the townships and cleaning up our neighborhoods, which is one of the things I'm continuously annoyed about. I don't understand why we're still sitting in debt everywhere. It doesn't make sense. But going back, if we talk about energy follows attention, the RAS conversation, we're paying so much attention on what's not working, that we are sitting in a traumatic space of sitting in debt. But what I wanted to go to with the ZBCan, what I liked was the simplicity of how it, as an activation, it sent a message through action. Every little corner had a ZB can, which is like a dustbin that people could throw it into the ZB can. You don't know who's observing you. You might actually win something. And it started driving behavior a lot, because on a Saturday everybody would wake up, take the ZB pack, the ZB plastics, and go and put them on the corner, and then they don't know who's actually gonna find them, and then they're gonna win. It was like a whole big community stuff. I always think, wouldn't it be amazing to actually have some massive social uniting activation like that? And I can see how this V20 thing might benefit from just listening to this conversation, might benefit from a ZBCan treatment in this instance.
Love
So
that.
this is
And we
yeah.
are working on funding, and we are working on a funding model. And as soon as we have sufficient funding, then absolutely
Yes.
there'll be a ZBCan for values.
There you go. I cannot wait for that. This is actually quite exciting. You're on the Leadership Masterclass. We are talking about values. We are talking about activation. We are talking about the new 1994. I keep saying that. So we are kind of like really just resetting. I think Monday used the word resetting our energy a little bit, because it always feels like our energy has been distracted. And I think one of the things that's also interesting is that we are doing global work from a South African perspective, because I think it's the first time, even though the V20 has been around for years, it feels like there's a particular deliberation by the South African team to kind of embed humanity into the work of the G20. Which then will have a global influence. But when we come back, I want to start wrapping up with our guests, and we talk about, so how can you get involved? What is it that you need to do to be part of this shift in the social software in this instance? And we'll be back after this.
The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is a professional development center for professionals who aim to improve their professional standing. This means that the learning programs we run are more than just academic programs. They are work-based programs that focus on leveraging your current experience as a professional to build your overall profile. A year down the line, the Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is developing into a preferred center for professional development in Pretoria, with 8 professional development faculties including accounting, teaching, entrepreneurship, as well as IT and many more. For more information, go to acwbl.org or dial +27 12 751 7608. The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning, where work is learning.
Hello, welcome back. You are on the Leadership Masterclass. We are wrapping up. We are talking about values, exciting things. I've been doing research on values for the last 7, 8 years or so. And something that's very interesting that has come up about values, which I don't know how useful it is in this context, is the idea that only 18% of the people around us share our most important values, right? So there's a 82% chance that someone doesn't agree with your values. And from that perspective, I think the whole idea then of having a national values charter becomes quite fascinating, because then it's a uniting story for a lot of the disparate values. If we don't do that work, there is many people that are going to say, "Oh, my values are right, my values are right." So that's the first thing. But the second thing is the behavior that go behind the values. I find that we spend so much time talking about values, but we don't actually talk about what would they look like. What is the work that around that, if at all?
Work around the behaviors. Was that
yes.
the question?
Yes, yes.
Well, to your point, which you've just said, I haven't heard that stat, but it definitely sounds very interesting. And you've mentioned, Monde also mentioned, you know, we nearly broke out into a civil war, and you've mentioned 94, 95 repeatedly. You know, something that isn't widely known is the work of Don Beck and the work that Don Beck did with Madiba at the time of Madiba's release.
Spiral dynamics.
Yes. So you've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've got Dr. Clare Graves' value levels, and you've got evolution of consciousness or spiral dynamics, which is the work of Don Beck. And Don Beck, they say he traveled to South Africa 63 times at the time of Madiba's release and actually worked with Madiba so that he understood that 82%.
Yes.
So, you know, it's the responsibility of the more evolved person to understand not that any one person is more evolved than the other, but we all have different value levels as rather. So there's different value levels. Neither one is right or wrong, but we need to be able to speak to each human's value level. So when you're looking at a collective national values charter, which right now we are in the awareness stage, advocacy, moving towards influencing policy, culminating in these artifacts. So with the National Values Charter, where you're looking at equality, equity, sustainability, and you're looking at solidarity, what does that look like to me? So because what it looks like to me is going to be very different to what it looks like to somebody in a different geographical area, or to a student, or to a corporate.
Somewhere. Yes.
100%. So that speaks to the 82%. What does that look like to me? And why? What is the so what to me? Why does that matter to me? So that work, and that speaks to one of your earlier questions in terms of the rigor behind the work that we're doing. And we have a very big research stream backed by our educational institutes in South Africa to ensure that we are taking into account all areas of South Africa to inform that work, so that the so what and what does it mean to each level, they buy into these three values, because they're going to look very different and mean very different to all of us. But to get me inspired, it needs to speak to me. It needs to, so that 82%. So that's, I loved what you said. I hope I articulated that briefly enough.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting. Monde, we need to wrap up. I'm listening to this. I'm hearing all of this science. I'm hearing all of this passion, and I want to get involved. How do I get involved as just a person, whether I'm a corporate, whether I'm a person on the street in Langa somewhere?
No, thank you very much. When the doc mentioned Don Beck, you know, my mind went back to some of the material that one is exposed to. So let me just bypass there quickly, because there's a very interesting thing that Dr. Don Beck also tabled to Madiba, was that your country is very religious, right? Very religious country, and your country as well is a sporting, loving country. And Madiba said, I don't want to get into religion. I don't want to do anything there. I don't want to tamper people's religion, etc. So let's leave that completely. Let's focus on sport. And I'm raising this deliberately because there is a winning mentality that is present in our sporting codes, which needs to be duplicated and replicated in all spheres of South African life. So that focus was deliberate, by Madiba, and going back to the role of top leadership, which is setting the tone at the top, making the tough decisions of where we want to go as a country. So we can't move without leadership. There'll always be leadership. Even with the smallest nucleus of a community, there'll always be leadership that is required to take us into a particular direction, even if it's driven by dialogue, etc. But we must set a particular tone. And so looking and understanding Don Beck and the role and the information shared, that this is how your country is structured, this is what makes your country tick, these are the choices that you have, what do you want to do? And even the story of the Rainbow Nation as well. I mean, that's another beautiful story of how it actually came about. as well. So and all of this is coming from research, as Dr. Wendy is talking about. So there's people at a particular level, may not necessarily be right down at community level, but we all have a different role to play. So the researchers who have that strong point to go and analyze society, as how Donbeck does, the whole spiral dynamics view, etc. Most of Africa, I think, is purple, if my mind serves me correct there, Dr. Wendy. And people just want the basic necessities. People just want the basic necessities, right, on the African continent in certain places. So then what kind of leadership do you need that can respond to those specific needs? Now, in South Africa, we've always had a problem with service delivery, right? We're talking national dialogue, we're talking V20, etc. But the man on the street is actually interested in service delivery on the ground, right? Even as we speak today, there's a protest happening in Ekurhuleni, and a lot of protests are not covered in the country because there's so many. And at the heart of it is the decisions and choices made by leaders who are sitting with budgets, uneducated. If you look at the Auditor General's report of municipalities, etc., they don't understand how to execute their responsibilities, and therefore a lot of budgets they return back to Treasury, and we see that across the public sector. And the question is why, right? So it always goes back to not the man on the street or woman on the street, it goes back to the leadership at the top. So what kind of tone is being set at the top? What kind of people are in place who must deliver on these specific needs that society deserves, because they're also enshrined in the Constitution in terms of socio-economic rights, right? So we have socio-economic rights, not just political rights, that we now enjoy, but we've got to focus on socio-economic rights. So even when we talk then about how do people get involved, and I go back to what I said earlier, is who are we trying to talk to? And when we look at the levers of power, yes, we want everyone to be involved, but in order to turn the fortunes of South Africa, our analysis is telling us that leaders must be engaged and brought into the room, that holds certain responsibilities, right, whether it's in business and private sector and in society, those who are doing specific work in communities, etc., who are now involved in V20, so that we will all carry this load around the kind of change we want to see. So the leadership will always set the tone as well. And the ordinary person on the street, through V20, the civic stream as well, that has now come through, there's opportunity there to plug in. We're hosting dialogues every now and then. But if you look at the bulk of the discussions that are coming through, our target has been senior leaders, especially through the equality dialogues. So it's deliberate, because those are the people that can make things and must make things happen for the country as we move forward as well.
Yeah. I like the frameworks. I love frameworks because I think frameworks kind of simplify conversation, right? We spend so much time using a lot of words, but you've just made so much sense to me, the both of you, by going through the spiral dynamics framework, right? Because I can now be able to say, oh, we are trying to move from this color to that color. And that simplifies it, because then it also creates a little bit of curiosity. Go like, ooh, let me go and check what this color, because people love these tangible little things that they can do and labels that actually give them language together. So it has been a very useful conversation.
Before you go, if you can just encourage your listeners, call to action, cool. I just didn't want to finish without letting everybody know. Please follow us on Instagram. So there is a Values 20 group on Instagram. So please, can you and can all your listeners follow us on Instagram? We post our activities on Instagram. Direct message us on Instagram if you want to be involved. If you want to be involved in the organizational stream, you can get a hold of me also on Instagram, in the platforms, and we can send you a partnership agreement, which has got a whole list of options with regards to how you would like to partner with us. But partner with us. We really want to shift society.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. You actually answered my question because I was actually going to say, so what's your call to action as far as this is concerned? So follow us on Instagram. It's Values 20 organization, right? That people should actually follow.
Values 20
on
group.
yeah, Values
So
20 group.
values, the letter, values, the number 20 and group. So if you go values 20 group, you'll find us. Follow us, direct message us, and we'll respond to you. We can let you know what the streams are, which stream you'd like to be involved in. We can send you a partnership agreement. But it's a collective movement. So we want people involved, and we want to together to be able to shift South Africa towards that 5-year end goal that we're moving towards.
I can't wait to see what this 5-year would look like. This has been very exciting. It feels like we've just been building up from a very big picture that we started with Dumi and Alex a little earlier, and to today, where it feels very tangible for me. It feels like, ooh, I'm looking to see the National Charter, and I'm looking to see the ZB-cans. I'm looking to see all of this candy that's going around. Seducing me to actually be move from purple to beige or something like that, which is very exciting. Mondendlovu, as well as Wendy Mahoney, thank you so much for your contribution today.
Thank you for
Thank you very
having us.
much. Thank you,
Yes,
Dr. Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you, Wande.
And-
Thanks, Mo.
And that was my conversation there with the V20 as well. So get involved, and I will see you, between you and me, again next week as we talk about global oneness, which is one of the big things that is also happening. The world is changing, and you can't be sitting there. See you soon.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
Mongezi.C, it's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuga Online, your inspiration radio station.